anyway, just got you guys here on Zoom that I'm going to be teaching to. So thanks for being here. And like I said, probably my own fault for having to switch the time and start it a little earlier. But I found out yesterday that the board is having a recognition of the top 500 agents in the MLS. And so because of that, I got invited to go and participate in this recognition that they're going to do for the top 500. So anyway, so that's the reason for the change in time is I need to be done and headed out of here at before 11 o'clock. So anyway, so what we're going to go through and cover the information, and I guess hopefully you guys, if you have questions on Zoom, you'll unmute and ask your questions, and we'll go from there. So all right, so here's what we're going to start with is I want to start with talking about our prospecting. So as you prospect, probably when I first started in real estate, when I got my license in 1996, the company that I was with and the office that I was with had this room where it was kind of the computer room of if you wanted to use a computer at the office, you would go into this computer room, and there was, I don't know, 4 or 5 computers that were there that we would use. But then up above at the top of the room, they had these shelves that had all of this material that was just training stuff that you could listen to, cassette tapes, basically. And I remember I grabbed this one audio program and pulled it down and I listened to it. And the particular guy that was training it was talking about how long you should keep a lead for and blah, blah, blah. And so I tell you that story because where we're going to start today is I want to talk to you about prospecting, and I want to talk to you about how to work the leads that you will get from your prospecting. And just how that process, the whole process works of why. We talked on Tuesday, we talked about door knocking a little bit. And I don't think I mentioned this. I alluded to it, but I don't think I mentioned it. But I remember I would go out and I would knock on doors every day. And I would go in the same area day after day for a couple of years. And it was a big area, big neighborhood. So there were a lot of houses that I was going to. But what would happen is I remember certain conversations I would have at a door where maybe somebody would tell me, oh, we're never going to sell. We would never sell this house. In fact, any of you that have done any door knocking, you will have heard people say, I'm going to die here. They're going to bury me out in front in the tree, that tree that's out in the front. If you've done any amount of door knocking at all, you've heard people say that. Well, I would get that. But yet then within months, I would be out driving to go door knock, and I would be driving down a street that I had already knocked on doors, and I would notice a for sale sign in front of a house. And then I would look at the house and I'd be like, I remember that person telling me whatever it was that they told me, but basically that they were never going to sell. So what happened? What changed? How did they go from I'm never going to sell, I'm going to be buried under the tree out front, to within a few months, there's a for sale sign in front of their house? Now, that's not necessarily that I need you to answer that question, but I want you to think about it. And if you do have thoughts, that's fine. I would love to hear those as well. But just kind of think out for a minute. What happens? Why would that take place? Why would you have a scenario where somebody says they're never going to do it? And so even though I talk about it from the standpoint of door knocking, and the reason I do it that way is because it's more obvious, meaning if you're just calling around to just listed or just solds, the next time you call around that neighborhood, it's not like you all of a sudden see a sign out in front, or that when you go to call a number that you notice their next door neighbor's house was for sale or whatever. So that's the reason I bring that up. But my point is that happens in your phone prospecting as well. You have people who are telling you we're never going to buy or we're never going to sell, and you don't know about it, but within a few months, some of those people end up selling. So that's what we're going to have the discussion about today is this is the first thing that I want to talk about is in your prospecting, you want prospecting. You guys can see that. Okay. I'll try to write big, but if not, I'll explain what I'm writing. Which by the way, will you guys make sure to put in the chat box your first and last name so that I have a record of who was in the class so I can check you off on the spreadsheet and don't empty the time. So if you guys will do that, throw it in the chat box, it'd be great. Okay, so we're going to talk about what I like to call prospecting on parallel tracks. So when you are prospecting, most of the time, the way that people prospect is we are out looking for the deal today, which there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, I think it's a good idea to do that, to go and be prospecting, looking for a transaction that's going to happen today. But when you are doing that, you're going to come across people who aren't ready today. And we'll talk about another piece of that in just a minute. But so when you're prospecting, I like to think of it or call it, you want to be prospecting on parallel tracks. So I want to be out prospecting, looking for the now business. So that's what I've written up here is now. I want to be prospecting, looking for the now business because I want to capture now business when it shows up. At the same time, I also want to be prospecting for my future business as well. So think that way. When you're prospecting, you should be prospecting on two parallel tracks. So the first track being, I'm trying to find the people who are going to buy or sell a house tomorrow, but in the same time frame or the same time, I'm also looking for the people who are maybe not going to do something tomorrow or next week, but that might do something in the next 6 months, 9 months. Because typically, if you guys were here, but if you plan on being in real estate a year from now, I have only had, I think, one time that when I did that, when I said, raise your hand if you're being in real estate a year from now, I've only had one time that a person didn't raise their hand. And that when that happened, I said, so what's going on? And they're like, I don't know. I just think I'm not going to be around. Okay. But typically most people feel like, yes, I'm still going to be in real estate a year from now. Well, if that's true, you're going to be in real estate a year from now, then while you're prospecting today, looking for the person who is going to do a deal tomorrow or next week, don't you think it would make sense to get the people who are not going to do something tomorrow, but that they're maybe going to do something in 6 months or 9 months or a year, to have a way that you would work with them so that when they become ready, you are the agent that they're going to use. And so that's what I call this, is prospecting on two parallel tracks. So I'm looking for the now business, but at the same time that I'm looking for the now business, if I come across somebody who isn't now, that's going to be future, I want to capture them, and I'm just going to work with them differently than the people who are in the now business. Okay. So now with that in mind, the reason I bring that up is I want to share with you a continuation of the story that I shared with you guys on Tuesday. So on Tuesday, I shared with you guys about how I cut off the story. So I'll give it quick up to the point that I had cut it off. But I shared with you guys that I had come into real estate. I started knocking on doors. I was doing 50 contacts a day. I was barely making it in the business. In fact, I don't think I said this on Tuesday, but there came a time after I had had my license about 1.5 years, there came a time that my wife said to me, if this deal doesn't close, you got to go get a real job. And luckily that deal closed. And quite honestly, looking back on it, it should not have closed. I've only had one transaction ever that we had to go to the title company and have them actually pay on a title claim. And that was it. And so looking back on it, that deal should never have closed, but it did. And my business after that deal closed is when things just took off for me, because it was about that same time that I met this guy that became a mentor for me, who said, quit focusing on the contacts. Now, that doesn't mean don't keep track of them, but quit focusing on the contacts and instead focus on setting one new appointment every day. Well, so I mentioned to you guys, and where I left off the story was after that training for the week that had gone by, I set one appointment every single day, and it typically took me 2 hours or less in which to set that appointment. Well, what ended up happening then is my business took off at that point. So I had drawn for you guys, I drew that learning curve, you know, on here that kind of showed this. Well, I did this steep part of the learning curve right then. My business took off because I was setting one appointment every single day. Well, as a result of that, what happened was I had mentioned to you guys also on Tuesday that if you will set one new appointment every day and you are committed to doing it every single day, and as soon as you get that appointment, then from there, what's going to happen is your business will take off. And that's what happened to me is it took off to where I was prospecting half as much. So I was typically doing 2 hours of prospecting now instead of 4. So I was doing half as much prospecting, but my income that next year doubled. Well, the next year after that, my income doubled again, not prospecting any more than I had, just focusing on it. I'll tell you why that was in a second. But doing just one new appointment every single day, what happened is my business then doubled again. And then the next year, it didn't quite double, but almost doubled again. Well, so what happened? Why? Well, what happened was this. Initially, when I would set an appointment, what would happen is now remember, I was saying it was about 2 hours of prospecting. What would happen is if I had not gotten an appointment, I would end up calling, and don't do this, by the way, I would end up calling a for sale by owner and just saying, hey, could I come by and take a look at your house? I might have a buyer that could be interested in your home. They would say yes. I would then set an appointment. I would go out, I'd look at the house. It never went anywhere. Well, so part of why I was able to still only setting one appointment every single day get to where I was doing 50 transactions in a year, part of what happened with that was I was able to do that because I got better at setting good appointments rather than made up appointments. And I say that made up appointments, meaning because I would call these for sale by owners and say, can I come by and take a look at your house? Knowing there was probably no interest in them in listing, but I was doing it as a way for me to cheat myself. So if you remember from Tuesday, the first thing I told you guys is power comes out of telling the truth. Power comes out of telling the truth. What that means is telling yourself the truth. Look, this isn't really an appointment. I said that to make myself feel like it, but it wasn't. So as I told myself the truth, that look, that wasn't really an appointment. You were just doing that so that you could quit prospecting for the day. And I don't know. I'm sure you guys never do anything like that, but that's how I was. So what happened then is I then had my business take off. Well, I'm walking around my neighborhood one day, and as I'm walking through the neighborhood in my neighborhood, I notice a guy that I had gone to high school with. So I don't remember, he was out walking his dog or something. I don't remember how I first saw him, but I ran into this guy that I had gone to high school with. He was a year younger than me in high school, and we were associates, I would say, like meaning like we played basketball together and stuff, but it wasn't like we were friends. But I ran into him, and when I ran into him, I started to talk to him, and we then built this relationship of now because we're neighbors. Well, along the way, as that was happening, my business was getting better and better, and I was doing more and more transactions. What ended up happening is one day he asked me, hey, so Russ, seems like real estate's going well for you. And I said, yeah, it's doing really good. And he said, well, so when are you going to move? And it caught me totally off guard. Now, part of why that caught me off guard and why that happened is because I had created a sphere of influence, which if you guys have not been to my SOI class, you need to go and attend that. And I don't remember when it's coming up next. I don't know if I don't have it on the schedule. So it's going to be in April, basically. But the next time I teach that, you should come to it if you haven't. And if you have, and you're not getting a ton of business from your SOI, then you need to come to it again. But I had built a lot of my business was coming out of the area that I lived in, because what I had done is it wasn't like I was farming. It was kind of like farming, but it was more of a demographic farm than a geographic farm. So I wasn't farming in the traditional sense, but my SOI that I had built was a demographic farm, as I guess what you could call it if you wanted to. But so I was doing a lot of business of the people who had moved in, because this home that I lived in at the time, what happened with it was that I had had the home built. And so all the other houses in there were starter homes that were new construction. And so I had just gotten to where I had created a relationship with a lot of the people who had built the homes. And what happened then is, as they were finishing college, getting better jobs, all that kind of stuff, they were now then moving, selling their house and moving on. So I had then built this relationship. So I was getting a lot of business from the people in that neighborhood. Well, so I'm talking to my friend Darren, and Darren says to me, so when are you going to move? And I was like, it had never even crossed my mind. Okay, so what we're going to talk about now, the next piece we're going to talk about now is the buyer seller cycle. Okay, so what I'm going to share with you is this is the cycle or the process that a buyer or a seller goes through before they buy or sell. And where I learned this was really after the fact, so this journey that I started on and to learn what I'm going to show to you guys today happened because of Darren saying to me, when are you going to move? And I said, never. Because in my mind, I didn't say this to him, but in my mind, I was like, hey, if real estate keeps going like it is, then like I'll be able to pay off my house in a year or two. Because the home, that home, I had paid $75,000 for that house. I was like, year or two, I'll have my house paid off. So I'm not going anywhere. Now, yet, what happened then is a year later, I moved. So within a year, Darren asking me, like, you knock on doors or you call people on the phone and they say to you, I'm never going to do it. And then a lot of them end up actually doing it. And when I say a lot, I don't mean a high percentage, but a greater number than you would believe end up actually buying or selling. So that's the idea of this prospecting on two parallel tracks. So now here's what happened is, and this buyer seller cycle is 3 phases. There are 3 pieces to this buyer seller cycle. The first thing that happens when somebody is going through the buying or selling process, the first thing that's going to happen is something that we call percolation. So this first phase is called the percolation phase. Now, let me show you what that looks like. So what happened is Darren said to me, so when are you going to move? I said, I'm never planning on moving. Yet a year later, I moved. What happened is a week later, or within a week, and I wish I would have recognized how powerful this was going to be for me at the time, because I would have kept notes on all of what I'm sharing with you. Unfortunately, I didn't realize this stuff until after it had happened. And then after it happened, I could look back and go, okay, I see how that all took place. Because for me, a lot of it was such a profound moment for me of saying I'm never going to move, and then a year later moving and looking back and going, how did that happen? What happened there? Because I was very committed to not moving. Okay, but here's what happened. So within a week of him asking me, and it might have even been the next day, quite honestly, I just don't remember exactly, but I remember within a day or two, week at most, I'm driving from my house to the office. So now where my house was at that time was 5,600. You guys that are familiar, Salt Lake County, I know we got Blake from down in St. George on here, but my house was 5,600 west, 6,200 south. My office that I worked at was 7800 South and Redwood Road. And so I would leave my house 5600 West, 6200 South, drive down typically to Bangerter Highway, take Bangerter Highway to 78 and over, or I would just go straight down 6200 South all the way to Redwood Road, turn right on Redwood Road and head down to 7800 South. Well, so any of you that have driven along there, and it's not as bad now that they've put an overpass there at 6200 South, but as you drive from the west side east and would get to Bangerter Highway, during rush hour traffic, it was pretty backed up. And so I remember within a few days of Darren asking me, when are you moving? I remember I'm driving along there and I get to that traffic there along 6200 South. And I remember thinking to myself, if I ever move, it will be east of Bangerter Highway. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but at that moment, and probably the moment that Darren asked me when I was going to move, but at that moment, I realized I'm in percolation. Now, I didn't consciously recognize it, but I was in this percolation phase. In the percolation phase, what's happening is they're just thinking about it. So what happened is by Darren saying to me, when are you going to move? And me saying, I'm never going to move, he planted a seed. And so, in fact, I just realized I left one thing out earlier. When we talked about prospecting, and I said that we're prospecting on two parallel tracks, we're looking for now business and future business at the same time. The other way you can think about that is the now business is the way that a hunter works. So like if you were a hunter, then you're going out looking for food now, versus the future business is more like how a farmer works. And the farmer is going to plant the seeds and cultivate and all that kind of stuff. And then over time, he's going to get this crop. Well, we want to prospect as a hunter. So when you're doing your prospecting, we already talked about Tuesday about your objective needs to be to set an appointment. And then we talked about the ways to do that. Focused on it, you connect the rapport, create value, and then close. Well, what happens though is you're going to come across people like where I was that haven't, hey, I'm not going to do it right now. Like I'm probably never going to move. But if you have some people who maybe are going to be ones that I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a second. But I want to always approach it from the standpoint of I'm out here trying to get an appointment is my primary objective. Is I need to set an appointment. So I'm going after it like the hunter. But in the event I can't get the appointment, then I'm going to turn into this farmer here that's going to capture the people so that down the road I can get it. Now, I'll show you what that looks like here in a second.
So one question, Ross.
Yes.
When we are prospecting and somebody says, well, I might be thinking about it in the future because different reasons, would that be the percolation maybe?
Yes. Yep. That would be somebody you would say, I work with my clients at their pace. So let's do this. Let me stay in touch with you. I'll give you some information, blah, blah, blah. But so, yeah, somebody who is like, and here's the thing. So let me actually even say this, Luz. I actually want to try. I'm going to ask for an appointment 3 times at least before I turn into the farmer. What I don't want you to do is go to ask somebody and then they go, yeah, we're not thinking about it. And then you just immediately go, oh, okay, well, let me get your information. And I've got a select group of people that I stay in touch with and this SOI class stuff. You want to ask for an appointment 3 times and I'll show you why. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So let me back off on that for a minute and let me finish this and then I'll show you why. But yes, what you're thinking is right on. Okay, next. So during percolation, what's happening is they're just thinking about it. So for me, that day when I was sitting there in the traffic and I had the thought of if I ever move, it's going to be east of Bangerter Highway. That was it. Like that thought just came into my mind and then it left. And I continued on to work and that was it. Well, then as time goes on, and like I said, I wish I could tell you the exact amount of time, but probably within a month, I'm driving along, I'm driving down 6200 South. I go up the hill that takes you, if you're familiar, to get to 3200 West-ish. And right after 3200 West, I look off to my right-hand side and notice this farmer's field is now all of a sudden got houses being built. Well, I had never noticed it before. So today, that day, I'm driving and I notice, oh, they're building some new houses over there. And then that was it. Like I just noticed. So I drive on to work. Well, after that day, I kept like daily, I would drive down that way and I would turn then onto 3200 West. I went down and then there was a street you could turn on and it was developed enough. They had the streets and stuff in and they had a few houses actually built. So the neighborhood was already under construction before I noticed it. And once this percolation started though, is what caused me to notice it, okay? So I noticed this, I drive by, I can see that they're building a model home. They've got a few other houses that are built. Well, I just continue on to work. The next time I drive by that neighborhood and I've got my wife in the car, I say to my wife, hey, have you noticed this neighborhood they're building right here? And she says, no. And I go, oh, you got to see this. So I drive down to the street, go across, and I point out to her, yeah, like right here, there's a park, there's going to be a pool. And, you know, I'm showing her all this and I'm like, these are nice houses. And she just kind of goes, yeah, that's nice. And we continue on. So what would happen then is just for a while, I just kind of kept driving by and checking it out, driving by and checking it out. Well, one day I noticed the model home is completed. So the next time my wife and I are driving in the car, I say to her, hey, they've got a model home. Do you want to go in and take a look at it? She says, sure. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but what happened at that point is I had now moved from percolation, which again, just percolation is it's going on under the surface. So think of it that way. It's under the surface that it's taking place, meaning that even when I was percolating, when I had that thought, well, if I did move, it would be east of Bangerter Highway, and driving by and I'm looking at this new construction and all that kind of stuff. That's all going on under the surface, meaning that even with my closest friends, I would have never said, hey, I'm thinking about selling my house and buying a new one. It just, because again, if you'd have knocked on my door at that point and I wasn't an agent, I still would have told you I'm not planning on moving ever, never. Yet I was already in the process of this taking place. So what happened though is the day we walked into the model home is I realize now that what happened is I entered phase 2, which phase 2 is called information gathering. My handwriting's horrible as it is, and then you guys are trying to look at it on the screen, so I apologize, but I'll tell you what it says. So the first area here is percolation. This next one is information gathering. So phase 2 of the buyer and seller cycle, buy or sell, is the information gathering phase. So what happened is we stopped at the model home when we walked in. Now, when we walked into the model home and the agent said to us, hey, thanks for coming, what do you think is the first thing I said to the agent?
What do you have available or how much?
Nope, that wasn't it.
Who knows then?
Well, any of you that have ever done an open house, what do people say to you when they walk in?
Or just welcome. You invite them to take a look inside.
No, what do they say to you? The first thing they say to you when you welcome them, come on in, and then they
we're just looking.
Yeah, we're just looking.
We're just
so
looking.
guess what I said when I walked into the model home?
You are just looking?
Nope, I said I'm a realtor. So, but it's a different version of that. So yeah, but in essence, that's what I was doing is I walked in though, and I said, I'm a real estate agent. I handed her my card and said, I'm just here today because my wife and I were driving by and I like to be aware of what's on the market. And so the reason we're coming through to look at it is just so that I know what's here. Now, why? Why would I say that to her? Which, by the way, is no different than a neighbor walking in on an open house and saying to you, "Oh, we're just curious. We just lived down the street. We just wanted to come and see." So why did I say I'm a realtor, and why do typically people, would they just say to you, "We're just curious. We're not in a hurry"?
You don't want to be sold to. You want to just look from a safe place, but don't bother me.
That's right. That's exactly right. Is everybody likes to buy, nobody wants to be sold. And so when they walk in, they're saying that to you as a way of, don't try to push me to buy. Now, part of why, and the reason I'm telling you all this is I partially want to make sure you guys understand that when they walk in and say that to you, or just, in your prospecting, whatever, but when somebody says to you, "Oh, we were just curious." So same thing if somebody on an internet lead. So if you're working an internet lead and somebody is saying to you, "Oh yeah, we just signed up on the website. We're curious about properties." Well, they're not lying necessarily to you, so I mentioned to you guys Tuesday, power comes out of telling the truth. The other thing that I would say is being honest and telling the truth aren't the same thing. So they're being honest with you when they say they're not truthfully looking to buy, they're just curious. They're being honest at that because that's truly what they believe. Now, the truth is, though, so they're being honest, but the truth is they're in this cycle and they're going through this process that they are going to buy or sell. So just kind of as an FYI, just so you guys know, 80%, 82% actually of the people who go to an open house will buy or sell within 6 to 9 months. 82% of the people who go to an open house will end up buying or selling in 6 to 9 months. And we actually did a survey on that. So I'll share with you really quick 2 different ones that we did. One was on open houses where we wanted to find out. And so what we did was we made everybody sign in. And then after they signed in, we followed up with them. And the majority of the people, so 82%, so let me make sure to clarify, 82% of the people will buy or sell within a year. But the majority of that 82% buy and sell within 6 to 9 months. So they aren't buying within the first few months even. It's typically 6 months out to 9 months out is when the majority of them do it. So you have a few before that, and then you have a few after that. But 82% will do something within a year. Now, so that's all open houses. Let me share with you a study that we did on internet leads. This was in 2009. So in 2009, we went back and we called the leads who had signed up on a website in 2008. So anybody that had signed up in 2008, so they had signed up during 2008. We took a time period, and I can't remember exactly what the time period was, but we took this time period and we called through these leads that had signed up in 2008. It's now a year later, we're calling to find out what's happened. Now, one key piece I forgot. We actually only called leads that agents had marked them as dead within 7 days. So we were looking at the leads that had signed up on a website, an agent got the lead, and then within 7 days, the agent said it's dead. There's no deal to be had. So if an agent said it was a good lead or they kept it to hold on and call it, we didn't, those words weren't the ones we were calling. We were trying to figure out this idea of the hunter and farmer kind of a thing. We're trying to figure out is if an agent gives up on it within a week, what ends up happening with the person? So we called through those leads, 50%, so 50% of those leads bought within that year. So now keep in mind, this wasn't every lead. It was the ones that agents gave up on really fast. So just as an FYI, why I'm telling you all this stuff is I want you to understand if you understand this process that people go through, you'll be able to then work them a little bit more effectively so that you're not letting deals fall through the cracks. In fact, one of the things that I like to say is if you're not making over $100,000 a year in this business, which, you know, because of what home prices are doing, that's not going to be really too difficult anymore. Like, meaning you got to do maybe what, 8 houses in a year or something, you're going to make over 100. So probably I should say, if you're not making at least $150,000 a year, probably 200, you have deals that are falling through the cracks because you're only going after one thing and you're letting the ones that are there fall through the cracks. So, okay. So information gathering is now where they're going to start to gather information. So when we walked into the open house or the model home, sorry, and said, hey, I'm an agent, I just like to be familiar with the inventory. In my mind, I still truly believed we were never going to move. I think my wife thought we weren't ever going to move as well. Like, we weren't looking to move, because at that point that this was taking place, I had one son, and by the time we moved in, I had a second one. And so my wife may have been early on pregnant. So, but I had one child, I had a 3-bedroom, you know, my starter home, quote unquote, was a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, but we had finished the basement. And so now I actually had 5 bedrooms and 2.5 baths. So it's not like I needed, like we were out of space. So we really didn't think we would move. So even walking into this model home, I didn't think I was moving. Yet, looking back on it now, I can see I had moved from percolation to information gathering. In information gathering, they're doing just that. They're gathering information. So to some extent, I would say anybody that walks into an open house is now in information gathering. Somebody that signs up on an internet website is probably still in percolation, but if they'll talk to you, they answer the phone and talk to you, there's a pretty good chance they've moved now even into information gathering as well. So just so you know. Now, what ended up happening then is my wife and I go and look at this house. As we walk through the model home, we're like, we really actually like this. And so I remember I went back down to the main floor. It was a 2-story. I remember we went down to the main floor and I walked into the agent and I said, hey, so do you have any properties here in this neighborhood that are in cul-de-sacs? And she said, well, as of right now, phase 1 is all sold out. Phase 2 is a cul-de-sac. And there are 2 lots still left in phase 2. And I said, okay. She showed me where they were. And we just said, okay, thanks. And we left. So we got in the car, we left, and continued to drive by there all the time. When my wife and I talked about it. And within a few weeks, we go back into the model home and say, is this lot still available? Yep, it's still available. Great. We want to hold that lot. We gave her money to hold the lot. Now, then after that, we did what most buyers do, is we got buyer's remorse. So we had put money down, a few days go by, and actually, interestingly enough, the agent had said some things to us that actually helped give us that buyer's remorse. So to some extent, the agent created the buyer's remorse, although it's probably not true. It's just we used that as the excuse. And what ended up happening, though, is we go in and cancel and said, you know what, we don't know what we're doing. We really shouldn't be going and buying a house. We don't need a house. All the stuff that a typical buyer would do. And so we canceled. Now, after we canceled, we still continued to drive by and look at the neighborhood and watching it being built and all that kind of stuff. A few months go by. After a few months go by, we get talking and realize, hey, we're still driving by this neighborhood every time we go out to dinner or whatever. And we are actually interested in it. Let's just do it. So we go back into the model home. I say to the agent at the model home, hey, is that lot still available? Because we would like to buy. And she says, no, but you could get this other one. Well, my first house was on a corner lot. And I was like, I'll never do that again. And it had a north facing driveway. And I said, I'll never do that again, especially after the snow yesterday. I'm like, I'll never do that again. So I swore I would never do it. Well, the agent says, we've got a corner lot. And I said, well, which way is it going to face? And it would have had a west facing driveway. So I was like, okay, I guess I could live with the corner lot, even though I didn't like being on a corner lot, I'll take it. So we put the money down on the corner lot. At the construction meeting, which I had gone fishing. I wasn't even at the construction meeting. I told my wife, do whatever you want, I don't care. And at the construction meeting, they tell her, hey, because of the setbacks, if you want to have a 3-car garage, it can't face west. You have to turn it on that corner lot. You'll have to turn the garage. So the house could still face west. And it does, but the garage is going to have to face north, which means I'm now going to have a north facing driveway. And I said, okay, I want a 3-car garage. So part of why I even bring that up is recognize that some of the stuff that people initially, and some of you guys have been licensed for a while, so you get it, but some of the stuff that people initially come in and say, this is a no-go, like that was a no-go for me. I will not be on a corner lot. I will not have a north facing driveway. Yet 20 years later, I'm still in the house that has a corner lot with a north facing driveway. And even yesterday, when I was shoveling my neighbor's driveway that is south facing, I was like, I hate the north facing, but I did it. Okay, so what happens then is after the information gathering, after information gathering becomes the active phase. This is where people are active. Now, to tie some things together here for you, this now prospecting and this hunter stuff is what we typically are looking for, is the people in the active phase. Typically what we're trying to do is when we're prospecting, we're wanting to find people in this active phase. Well, in the active phase, that time frame typically, and now, by the way, this ebbs and flows a bit based on the market. But if you just were to look at overall, like if just in general averaged it out, the time frame that somebody is in that active phase is usually 45 days. So a 45-day window is typically what your active time frame is. Yet this whole entire thing, if you were to look at it, ends up being between 6 and 9 months long. Now, you probably have a little bit of an idea on that now. When I said to you, people that come into an open house typically will do something in a 6 to 9 month period, this is why. Usually they're showing up to the open house in percolation or early in information gathering. And that's why it takes them that long, is because they've got to go through the whole entire process. And the active time frame is only 45-day window. So part of what I guess I'm getting at with you guys is I want to make sure that you understand that in this process that you are taking people through, is keep in mind that some of them are going to be in the percolation phase, some are going to be in information gathering and active as you're prospecting, or some of them are just not interested. Now, so let me tie some of this together to you. One of the things that I like to do in my prospecting is, as I'm prospecting with people and I go through, my first is my focus, my approach is to get an appointment, right? We talked about that Tuesday. My biggest focus to set an appointment. Then I got to create a connection and rapport, which I'm going to do that through asking questions, repeating and affirming, using empathy, making sure that I creating some connection or rapport with them. Now, after I've done that, or as I've done that, and as I feel like I've created some of that, so for me, let me run you through. If you remember Tuesday when I was doing this with Luz, as I had started it by saying, my name's Russ, I'm a Century 21, we listed your neighbor's house, blah, blah, blah. And I said, who do you know that wants to move into the area? And I'm doing all of that is around just creating some connection or rapport. Then from there, I said, well, what about you? Have you thought about selling your house? She said, no. And I said, oh, okay, well, so how long have you lived at this address? So again, I'm asking a question, trying to get this connection or rapport. So I'm usually going to ask, how long have you lived here? Where did you move from? How did you happen to pick this area? Where do you work? Like, I'm just going to ask questions. What do you like about the neighborhood? What would you change if you could? Which hopefully part of what you're seeing now is as I'm asking these questions, I'm doing it to create connection and rapport, but I'm also doing it for me to be able to figure out, is this somebody that I'm going to want to stay in touch with? They're not ready now. Is this somebody I'm going to want to just stay in touch with over time? So what I'm going to do that is I'm asking, you know, where did you move from? How'd you pick this area? Where do you work? What do you like about the area? Then I may ask, or then I'm going to ask, if you could change something, what would it be? Now, the reason I'm doing that is very similar to my friend Darren asking me, so when are you going to move? Is it planted a seed? So for me, by saying, if there were some things you could change about the area, what would that be? And part of why I'm asking that is that I'm hoping to plant the seed of, well, yeah, if this neighborhood didn't have whatever, you know, cars parked on the street, whatever it is, something that has them start thinking about moving. Okay. Then the other thing that I'm going to do once I've asked those questions, the next thing I'm going to ask in my prospecting is, if you ever were to move, where would you go next? Now, if they have an answer to that, if you say, if you were to move, where would you go next? And they say, I don't know, somewhere there it doesn't snow so much. Like today, if you're outdoor knocking, that may be one of the answers you get, is somewhere that it doesn't snow so much. Okay, great. So when would that be? So what you're looking for, so again, what I'm trying to do on this, by me asking, if you were to move, where would you go next? What I'm looking for is to find out, do they have something they're already thinking about? So I'm trying to find out, maybe, are they already in percolation? And if they're not, then hopefully by me asking that question of, well, what things would you change about the neighborhood, might start it. But I'm going to be asking, if you were to move, where would you go next? If they say, I have no clue, we're not moving, then I'm probably not going to worry about staying in touch with that person. But if they said to me, if I say, if you were to move, where would you go next? And they have an answer to that, they're probably somebody I want to capture as a lead to add to my select group of people that I'm going to stay in touch with about real estate, and or to get added to the neighborhood news in Moxie Engage, so that when they do decide to do it, I'm going to be the agent. See, the next piece of this that I want to talk to you guys about, and so either unmute, or I want you guys to type it in to the chat box here, which, so let me pull up the chat box. Which I can see. So just a reminder for you guys in the chat box, throw your name in there, first and last name, so that I have a record of who was here at the class, because that's going to be the sign-in sheet. So if you haven't done that, please throw your first and last name in there. And then, but now I want you guys to answer for me too in the chat box. So those that are paying attention, which I can see Becky is, because she responded, so thank you. But of these three areas, percolation, information gathering, and active, which one do you think is the hardest to set an appointment with somebody? Would it be hardest to set an appointment with somebody that's percolating, somebody who's information gathering, or active? What do you think? Either unmute or throw it in the chat box.
Percolation.
Okay, so I have one percolation, two percolation. Becky said percolation as well. Anybody else on? Blake says active. Okay. This is the way I test to see who's really online. Just kidding. All right. So Blake, why did you say active? I don't know if you can unmute. If not, type it in the chat box.
It's part of me just feels like it is the answer that's least.
Less people would say that.
Yeah, exactly.
Would get. Yep, which that is, you are correct. Have people guess, usually the majority of people say percolation, very few say active, and you are correct, by the way, is the active is the hardest ones to set an appointment with. Now, why? Why do you think the active would be the hardest? And-
Can I take a stab at it?
Yeah, go for it.
In my mind, I think that they're active, but yet hesitant to commit.
Okay. So, and you're right on that actually is, and the reason they're hesitant to commit is they're afraid you're going to try to get them to do something they don't want to do. Meaning, we've all had the experience of walking onto either a used car lot or a new car lot. And the question that we get at when we do that, when you walk in there, is the salespeople are trained, and rightfully so, by the way, but they're trained to say to you, what do I have to do to get you to buy a car today? What has to happen for you to buy a car today? So when we interact with people, especially people who are in the active phase, they know they're vulnerable. And so as a result, their defenses are up a little bit more because they don't want to be pushed before they're ready. Now, there's another reason too, though. The other reason is because of this whole process is, guess what people are doing who are in percolation and information gathering before they hit the active? I mean, guess what part of information gathering is about the house, but guess what else they're gathering information about? Any thoughts?
Agents,
That's right.
places to work with, people to work with.
You got it. The other thing they're doing along this process is, so the reason the active is the hardest ones to get an appointment with is during this process of percolation and information gathering, they're also gathering information about agents and they're figuring out who they would like and want to work with. So that's why this active is the hardest ones to set an appointment with, which again, I mentioned this already, but you're typically going to have to ask 3 to 5 times for an appointment for people who are in the active phase. People who are in the active phase, you're typically going to have to ask between 3 and 5 times for an appointment before they'll say yes. Because they're worried at an unconscious level, they don't want to be sold. And they're worried you're going to push them to do something they're maybe not quite ready to do if they're early in the active phase. All right. Any thoughts, questions, comments about that? Okay. All right.
Yes,
So the next
question, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
When are you going to do the neighborhood news again in the Moxie Engage?
When am I going to do the Moxie Engage again?
Yeah, the neighborhood news you said.
Yeah. I think, didn't I just teach it last week?
Did you? I don't know.
February 16th, I taught it. So,
Oh,
yeah.
I just missed it.
It'll probably be a month or so. I can, if you want the link, I can send it to you, but
Okay.
from last, but I try to get that one in about every 6 weeks-ish. So it'll come up again soon. All right. So the next thing I want to show you guys is I want to go through and talk with you about a survey that NAR does. So I'm going to show you this survey that NAR does of home buyers and sellers. So let me get this pulled up here and then I'll share it on my screen so you guys can see it. So give me 1 second here. And okay, can you see that?
Yeah,
Okay, good. So let me explain this to you. What you're looking at is every year, the National Association of Realtors does a survey of home buyers and sellers. So I'm going to show you 4 different charts from the NAR. And what they do is in July of every year, they send out these surveys. And what they do actually is they go to the county records. They don't use the MLS to send out these surveys because they want to include for sale by owners. And so they don't use the MLS. They actually use county records. So they go to the county records. They send out to people who have bought or sold during the past year. From July until about September, they're trying to get people to respond to these surveys. So they send them out and then they're following up. Then what happens is in September, they now take all the data they've gotten and they compile it. And then they release this in November at the National Association of Realtors convention. So in November every year, NAR does their convention. And they release this profile of home buyers and sellers. So what you're looking at is the most recent profile of home buyers and sellers. This came out in November, okay? And what I'm showing you here is the method used to find a real estate agent that the buyers used. So when you look at this chart, what stands out to you? Which, by the way, while you're thinking about it, this chart is, I have bought this report. I have them every year dating back to 2003, and it hasn't changed a whole lot. Oh, sorry, we're looking, this is the seller, not the buyer. We're looking at the seller one. So the buyer one has had some small changes, but essentially every year it's about the same. So what do you notice when you look at this? Where do sellers come from?
If it says it's referred by a friend, neighbor, or relative.
Yeah, if you look specifically at this here where it shows all sellers, 36% of the listings, so over a third of all the listings are going to come from being a referral, or they are a friend, neighbor, or relative. So if you're not working prospecting to your friends, neighbors, and relatives, you need to start. Okay. The next highest then goes on to be use the agent previously to buy or sell a home, and it's 27%. Now, on that one, which, by the way, well, let me say this first. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like that's kind of a low number, that only 27% of the sellers use the agent to buy the home, to buy or sell a home. Why? Why would only 25%, like, shouldn't a seller still be in touch with the agent who helped them buy the home? And shouldn't that agent be helping them now sell the house? So why do you think only 1 out of 4 that happens with?
The agent doesn't stay in contact with their previous clients.
Exactly right. Agents don't stay in touch with their, so to some extent, one idea that I want to give to you is when you do have a listing and another agent brings the buyer in for that listing, you should adopt that client, because it's very unlikely that they're going to stay in touch with them. And there's only a 25% chance they're going to list with that other agent. So you might want to adopt them as a client. You know, it maybe a couple months after, drop by and say, hey, I'm the agent who had the home listed. Just wanted to make sure everything's good, and bang your door to start staying in touch with them. But here's the other thing. These 2 columns added together is what I would call your sphere of influence. Add these 2 together, you're going to see that you come up to 63%. 63% of the time, the way that somebody, so 2/3 almost of the time, the way that people are going to choose who going to list their home with is either referred by or is a friend, neighbor, or relative, or they used them in the past. So if you want to get more listings, here's part of the secret to do it is work these 2 areas. Okay, outside of that, those 2, then what do you notice next? What else do you notice on this chart?
That the advertising, the calendar, the magnets don't have that much business going on.
Yeah, okay, good. So that's another good thing to notice is people who spend a bunch of money on advertising, you know, calendars, magnets, that kind of stuff. if that's all you're doing, it's less than 1% chance that you're going to get a deal from it. Okay. So here's the other thing that I would point out to you guys. Notice on this, sorry, let me get the mouse going here. Notice on all of these, like once you get outside of this, other is the next best way. I wish I knew what it was. It's the third best way to get a listing is other, whatever that is. But outside of that, notice the rest of these drop down to be 5% or less. So here's what I want you to learn from this. Here's the key thing I want you to take away from that is, so from this chart, the first thing I want to make sure you guys know is you need to be working your sphere of influence. So if you're not, start today. Friends, neighbors, relatives, get in touch with them. Stay in touch with them. Second thing that I want to point out to you is notice that after that, it's a significant drop into, and really not a whole lot different of the different types of prospecting you could do. So meaning, this is, personal contact by the agent. So door knocking or the phone, referred by another agent, a website, a direct mail. Like outside of that, it really doesn't matter too much what you're doing as far as your prospecting. So here's the key pieces I want you to take away from this. In terms of your prospecting, make sure you're doing your SOI every day. But then outside of that, pick one or two other ways. So you should have 2 to 3 ways, with SOI being one. So you should have outside of your SOI 1 or 2 other ways that you're going to prospect. Is it for sale by owners, expireds, just listed, just sold? I don't care what it is, but pick 1 or 2 others, and you can see it really doesn't matter. They're all about the same effectiveness. Pick those and then stick with it. The thing that I see agents get themselves in trouble is they bounce around too much. They'll go do some door knocking, then they'll go, oh, I should go do an open house, and then I should do a mailer and send some stuff out. I should put out some signs, get people to, like, they bounce all over the place. If you will choose 2 or 3 ways you're going to prospect, SOI being one, then outside of that, for sale by owner, expired, just listed, just sold, whatever it is you want to do, and focus on it, it'll work. But most agents bounce around so much that they don't get good at the others. So focus on 1 or 2 others. Okay, next, let's look at, this is the chart for how how buyers chose their agent. What you will notice on this one is it's essentially the same thing. So you've got here referred buyers, a friend, neighbor, or relative, again, 38%. Use the agent previously, 12%. Add those 2 together is 50%. So 50% of the time, the way that people are finding their agent is through SOI, basically. Okay. And then after that, you drop down, inquire about a specific property viewed online is 10%, the website 9%. So again, same thing on this one. You'll notice just work your sphere of influence is part of what the message I'm trying to get you guys to see is. If you're not working your sphere of influence, do that. And then outside of that, pick 1 or 2 other ways and really focus on doing them. Okay. All right. Next.
So Ross, in the other chart, even though they are lower, they are a little bit better, the percentages that with the sellers.
On this one, is that what you're saying?
I mean, the buyer side, the percentages, even though are lower after the SOI, they are a little bit better than the seller, I see.
Correct. Yep, that is correct. So, part of what that would say is really your SOI is your best way to get sellers. Buyers can come from a little, it's still good, 50% obviously, but then the others, you got a better chance of picking up a buyer from some of the others. Yeah. Okay, next, I want to show you now on for sale by owners. Now, in our industry, there are 2 types of data. There's empirical data and anecdotal data. And typically, our industry is full of anecdotal data. Anecdotal data is the stories we tell. It's what people say, but there may not be any data to back it up. So the reason I bring that up to you is for my whole career in real estate, I have heard people say anywhere between 80 and 98% of all for sale by owners end up listing their home. The truth is, remember, power comes out of telling the truth. The truth is there's no data to back that up. There is no data that says what percentage of for sale by owners end up listing their house. And the reason is because we don't know how many for sale by owners are out there. You could guesstimate, but we don't really know how many for sale by owners are out there. Meaning, if I went home today and put a for sale by owner sign in my front yard and did no other advertising than that, how would you ever know unless you happened to drive by my house that my house was even for sale? So there's no data of what percentage of for sale by owners end up actually listing. But the reason I think what happens is, in fact, actually, let me tell you a quick story. I was in a training. We had a guy from Boston, Massachusetts, fly out here to do a training for a different company that I was with. And he came out here and he said, according to NAR, 88% of all for sale by owners end up listing their home. Well, I had already been trying to find that stat. That's the reason I tell you it doesn't exist, is because I have tried and tried and tried to find. And I already told you, I buy this report from NAR every year. There's nothing in there that says the percentage of for sale by owners that end up listing, because they have no way of knowing. NAR doesn't know how many houses are for sale by owner in Utah right now. They don't know. There's no way. So I went up to this guy and I said, hey, can you get me a copy of that from NAR? I've never been able to find it. And he goes, well, I don't have it with me, but I've got it at my house in Boston. I'll be glad to send it to you. And I said, great, send it to me. And he said, okay, when I get home, I'll send it to you. I gave him a business card, never got it. So I had sent him a message on Facebook, because part of the training, he was like, go follow me on Facebook. So I did. And I said, hey, you were going to send me that report that says that 88% of all for sale by owners list. I just wanted to remind you. And he goes, yeah, I'll get it to you. Never got it. So it doesn't exist. And I wasn't trying to be rude. I was really like, if you have it, I want to see it. But here's where I think it comes from. You'll notice up here, what this chart is showing is the percentage of homes that sold, how many of them were for sale by owner versus agent assisted. Here is the agent assisted. So I think this is where people get it. When people say 88% or 80% or 98%, I think they're thinking of this chart, but that's not what this chart says. This chart just says of all the homes that sold, 88%, or in last year, 87% in 2022, 87% were an agent assisted, and 10% were for sale by owner. So we've had a jump back up. And that kind of makes sense to me if you think about what the market was doing the first half of last year. But 10% of all the houses. So what this is saying is, of every house that sold in the market, 10% were a for sale by owner. So just keep in mind that for sale by owners do sell. I say that because I want you guys to know they do sell. But the other piece I want you to know is this. So this is the last chart we're going to look at, then we'll be done for today. This is the selling price, the median selling price of for sale by owners. So what you're looking at now is, of all the for sale by owners that sold and that reported back, the median selling price was 225. Well, clearly some of those people are going to be selling to people they know. So that's 225 as well. But if they didn't know the seller, it sold for 260. So hopefully this makes sense to you. If somebody's selling their house to a family member or a friend, they're probably going to give them a deal. And as you can see, if they knew the seller, that is what happened. But if they didn't know the buyer, if the seller and buyer didn't know each other, 260 was the median sales price. So the median sales price is getting to the middle of the data, okay? If you look at agent assisted, the median sales price is 344,919. But so if you look at the difference here, and this one's big. Typically it's 12 to 14% is usually what it shows. So I'm wondering if there's some type of an error on this, or there's got to be some type of an anomaly, because that's almost a 25% difference. But here's the reason I show this to you. The reason I show this to you guys is because why does somebody sell their home for sale by owner? Typically,
Save commissions.
yeah, they think, well, they are going to save the commissions, but really what they're trying to do is make more money, right? But
Yeah.
based on what you look at this chart, is that what happens according to the data?
No,
Yeah, they walk away with less money. Now, like I said, typically it's somewhere 12 to 14% on an annual basis when I look at this. For whatever reason, last year there was a big difference. It was a 25% difference. So I probably wouldn't go in and say that to us, a for sale by owner today. Hey, I can get you 25% more, because you're probably not going to get that much more, but they're typically going to sell and walk away with more money. Now, here's why. I had one time I was watching an infomercial. It was scenarios like on just flipping through channels, and I'd come across this infomercial about buying investment properties. So I'm like, I'm an agent, I'm going to see what they have to say. So I'm watching it. And one of the things they recommended you do is you go buy a home that is for sale by owner. Then and they said basically whatever they're asking, offer them that price. Then they said what happens is what you want to do is, which by the way, I'm not endorsing this. I'm just telling you why I think for sale by owners end up selling a lot of times for less, is because of this type of a strategy that people use, which is they go get the for sale by owner under contract. Then what they said on this infomercial is the seller then makes plans. They go out and start building a new house, or they start doing whatever. They said, then you go back to them after your inspection and they said, find all the stuff that's wrong. And you guys know, if you've had an inspector go out, even a great house can look scary. If you look at the inspection, it can look like, whoa, there's a lot of problems with this house. So that's what they said to do, is they said, take now that to the seller and tell the seller, look at all this stuff that's wrong with your house. And I like to look at it from the standpoint of buyers have thousand-itis. Every time they see something on an inspection report, they think that item should reduce the price by $1,000. And so you add those up, now all of a sudden they're coming back going, you need to reduce your price by $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Well, that's what this infomercial was saying, is that's what you do. And then they said, and they told them, get a long due diligence and wait so that they're already invested in whatever other property they're going to, and now they'll negotiate with you. See, I think that's part of what goes on, is a for sale by owner sometimes gets taken advantage of, because they're most first-time home buyers are not going to go do a for sale by owner because they don't know how to do it. So they're typically going to want to use an agent. A for sale by owner is either selling to an investor or somebody that knows what they're doing, that's going to try to take advantage of the seller that might not know. So to me, that's the whole reason I show you this chart, is I just want you to see that there is value in using you as an agent. All right. Cool. All right, that's what I got for you guys today. Any questions, thoughts? A little bit shorter today, but I gotta be there by 11, so. All right, no questions, then.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thanks for being here, guys. Take care.
You too. Thank you.